Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I was going to be saying thank you very much to Harvey, but we appear to have lost Harvey. Um, Harvey was broadcasting, and I am broadcasting from the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe. And I'm so thrilled to welcome you all to our second live event of the 2021 fall season and to thank our friends at the Ottawa Public Library for their ongoing collaboration. My name is Sean Wilson. I'm the Artistic Director of the Ottawa International Writers Festival, and we're entering our third season of pandemic programming. I want to thank the Government of Canada, the Government of Ontario, the City of Ottawa, the Ontario Arts Council, the Canada Council for the Arts, Carleton University, CBC, and of course the Ottawa Public Library for their ongoing support. And I also want to thank you for supporting authors and booksellers through these difficult times. Our official bookseller is Perfect Books on Elgin Street, and I know that wherever you are right now, there's an independent bookseller nearby who would be more than happy to sell you some great books. The festival is supported by generous individuals like you, so I hope you'll consider subscribing to our newsletter and making a donation to support our ongoing programming and children's literacy initiatives. Tomorrow night, I hope you'll join us again at 7:30 p.m. for an evening with Guy Vanderhaeghe, one of this country's most acclaimed authors, as Stephen Beattie sits down with him to discuss his stunning new novel, August into Winter. It will be streaming from the festival's website, our Facebook page, and our YouTube channel. If you enjoy this event or any of our virtual programming, as I said, please consider making a charitable donation. Our host tonight is activist, educator, and author Julie Lalonde. The launch of her memoir, Resilience is Futile, was the last time the festival was able to hold an in-person event back in March of 2020 in the before times. And it's an amazing book. And I hope everyone tuning in tonight also takes time to attend one of Julie's free online workshops for bystander intervention. She's doing a remarkable service for this community and people across Canada, helping us stand up for our neighbors and take care of each other. So let's give a warm virtual welcome to our host this evening, the one and only Julie S. Lalonde.
Am I still around?
Harvey, yeah, do you want to say a few words, Harvey? You're back.
I guess due to technical difficulties, something happened, but I would like to also echo Sean's remarks and say bonsoir, good evening, and welcome. Bienvenue. My name is Harvey Slack, and I am a proud Ottawa Public Library Board trustee. I'm very happy to be with you this evening. Kwai Kakina. We believe it is important to acknowledge that even as we gather virtually, we are on the unceded and ancestral territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people. Nous rendons hommage à toutes les Premières Nations, les Inuits et les Métis, leurs années, leurs ancêtres, et nous soulignons leur importante contribution passée et présente. Thank you to Sean, our partner in this event, the Ottawa International Writers Festival. Tonight, as Sean said, we welcome Ashley Bristow to talk about her memoir, My Own Blood. If you haven't read it yet, My Own Blood, a memoir of madness and special need parenting, is available at a library branch near you. Before we begin, I do want to invite you to join us on Wednesday, September 15th at 7 p.m. for our next author event. It's a conversation in French with author Marie-Thé Morin as part of Croisée des mots, a series that highlights Ontarian authors reading en français. Earlier that day at noon, you may wish to take in our next gardening workshop, Harvesting Seed and Propagating Native Perennials for Your Garden with Master Gardener Sheila Curie, and it's not too late before fall sets in. Remember, you can always visit the Ottawa Public Library website to find out about our upcoming programs and to access the wide range of content and resources that come with a library card. As we already said, it's a pleasure to have Sean Wilson, and thank you to everyone for joining us. Have a great evening. Merci et bonne soirée. And now over to Julie.
Hello, hello. Hi, Ashley.
Hello.
Welcome. Welcome to Ottawa.
Thank you so much.
I'm so sad that you can't be here in person. I'm gonna say this multiple times, but go and get this beautiful book. I mean, it's written beautifully, but also I'm a sucker for a good cover. So well done. It's beautiful. Also, I want to begin the conversation by saying we're talking about disability, and as someone with a disability, I can't look at blue screens for very long. So I wanted to welcome folks while you could see me, and then I'm going to look like I'm too cool to be here and put my prescription blue lenses on so I can participate and have a good chat with Ashley. So
Right on.
welcome. Welcome. My first question to you, as someone who has written really raw personal things with a bit of an angry tinge, which I say in a positive way, why go there? Why write this book, and why write it in the way that you did, which is truly, I think, absolutely, I mean, mind-blowingly powerful, but very different from, I think, what people expect of, oh, this is a mom of a disabled kid. I know how that story is going to play out. And from page one, word one, you're like, oh, no, that's not how this is going to be. So why do it?
Oh, I had so much rage.
Which
I had
I'm here for.
all the rage, and yeah, I mean, I loved your book.
Thank you. It's like game, recognize game. Yeah.
I was like, look at this woman, give it. Like, like you look right at it and name it. And that's what I was finding myself. It was the only way that I was hearing my place in the world echoed back at me, was during the process of during the period that's described in the book, which is really sort of almost the first 3.5 years of my son's life. I went very much off the deep end while saving my son's life and our family, with an intensive therapy program and just a huge undertaking of world building at our house. But in the midst of that, I lost who I was. I was a career woman. I was a media professional. My career was going great. I was the mother of a precocious 4-year-old who was becoming multilingual. My husband is the author Chris Turner, many award-winning, an article and book written by that guy. And we were all kind of headed together into this wonderful world. And then arrives this child who is not just imperfect, but is perfectly imperfect, ultimately. But something's wrong and we don't know what it is. And in the midst of losing grasp, like it was like falling down a hill, scrabbling at boulders and pieces of grass as I fell, the only thing I could do was tell myself the truth. And I started an anonymous blog just to keep my thoughts straight, because I was finding that what I was hearing from doctors and from very well-meaning friends and family was, nothing's wrong, you're okay. Everything's fine, just keep going, like get him a babysitter or whatever. And I was like the world is gaslighting me. I need to look right at this. And anybody who's ever even considered parenting, the thing that comes up is, well, if I had a child, I would want it to be healthy. And then what happens if you have an unhealthy child? Well, then maybe you don't want that child. Like, that's where your brain goes. And then we stop talking. As a society, we stopped talking at that point. It was like, oh, well, you would never not want your own, and it's a very uncommon conversation. And I had been trained, like all of us, not to have that conversation too. And I was losing myself inside, not speaking about how angry I was that people were saying nothing was wrong, and how there was no place for me inside being expected to do everything.
Yeah, and it's funny when you said that, because I literally wrote a note to myself trying to think of, like, because I was like, there's something, and it was to me, it was like, you could have called this book just like Face It, like just fucking face it, because that's what I felt like you were constantly making people really do, which I thought was so powerful, right? Which was like, you have to look at it, right? Like, so many folks are disabled, and like we could all theoretically be disabled tomorrow, and yet we don't talk about disability, and we don't talk about the burnout, and we don't talk about the idea that the mother is probably hysterical, but also single-handedly holding the family together, and all of these weird, messed up dichotomies, and you're not allowed to complain. And so I thought it was so powerful. And you also were very blunt, which is my language, so I was here for it. But I found I think it's very brave in our country, where we view Medicare, for example, as so sacred, to say, yeah, real grateful it exists, but like full of holes, kind of sucks, leaving people behind. And so you're really naming that medical system piece and the grind, right? Like I felt like you did such a great job of talking about like the grind and the bureaucracy and how that's exhausting in and of itself, and how as the mom, you're supposed to do all the things, right?
Yeah. Thank you for all that. Yes, all that. Exactly. That's exactly like, yes. And I would say that like, I was very determined to have children, but not be defined by being a mother. My MO as a mom was, yes, I'm a great mom, but I'm not just a mom, you know, like I've got all these other gifts to give to the world, you know, and I have so much more to bring. And then suddenly I was just the mom. Nothing I'd ever done before mattered. Even my own experience, I have had multiple very big and scary medical things happen to me over the course of my life. And I am a very informed medical advocate. So when I would speak in like correct language at the hospital and be very forthright, like, okay, so let's you know, strategize going forward, they would be like, oh, did you take biology at university or whatever? You're just like suck it, like let's do this. Like, are we doing it, or are we doing it? Are you pretending to be a doctor or a social worker, or are we attempting to accomplish something? I wanted to come back to criticizing the healthcare system. I'm a gigantic believer in public healthcare, and I really appreciate the medical system in Canada. I think that our model is extremely good, and yet grotesquely underfunded by governments, like ritualistically and predictably underfunded by governments that look at certain people as more valuable than other people. Some categories of people are very valuable. If you're 68 and you need a knee replacement, you're on the docket. But if you're 1.5 and you have a rare diagnosis, or if you're 30 and you have endometriosis, but you already have 2 kids, so whatever it is, there's lots of categories where they're like, meh. There's a meh. And I've also observed, because I grew up in a medical family, that the leadership inside medicine has been attacked and dismantled by this bureaucratization of how we fund healthcare. So my dad is a doctor, and he's been saying for years, you would never, if you were the Law Society of Canada, lawyers would never allow themselves to be governed by bureaucrats who went and got masters in law administration. Plumbers would never be governed by people who weren't working in the trades. But somehow it has become a growth industry, like a massive growth industry, to go and get a master's of medical public administration or public health or whatever it is, and then come in at if you're a prime minister's son, over $100,000 level as an advisor to somehow give your sage opinion about how healthcare should work, even though you've never been a frontline worker at all. I think that that's very dangerous and enormously dangerous to people with disabilities, because although I'm a great advocate, my son is not going to be his own advocate as he grows. And being your own advocate, like you've had to be, like I've had to be, is exhausting. And eventually you forget your wallet at home and can't pay for parking and can't attend, or lose your temper, or just can't go one more time, or whatever.
And that, you know, was one of the common things you kept coming back to too, was how you were like, I'm going to be intentionally super polite, and I'm not going to give them any excuse to dismiss me, but also I have to do something with the fact that I'm raging with the heat of 1,000 suns, and I don't want to be made to feel grateful. Because I feel like in my experience anyways, yeah, in accessing medical, there's always this, well, you could be in the US, you could be bankrupt in the US. And it's like, okay, cool, but like, could we raise the bar a wee bit higher than going bankrupt for medical bills? Like, could we maybe aim for that? But you were very, I mean, because you're a feminist, because you have that analysis, also just very, sounds like very conscientiously aware of how you were perceived by the folks in those spaces and how you had to balance that to make sure that your son got the care that he needed. But then you, like you said, get lost in that process. Like, who gives a shit how Ashley's doing, because we need to focus on how her son is doing. And so you talk about sort of getting lost in that, and that your well-being, your mental health, your physical health was like, who gives a shit, right? What we really need to focus on is this poor child, right?
It wasn't even, I think, a thought. Like, Petro-Canada is at this present time has this caregiver, this new public relations, license to social license kind of campaign to care for the caregivers of Canada. And in essence, this is a downloading from public responsibility, governmental responsibility to a corporate body that ends up delivering or not delivering money or services to people who otherwise, or in previous generations, would have gotten them from their faith communities or their localized proximal communities, families, or from the government. But when I saw that Care for the Caregiver program come out with Petro-Canada, I was like, wow, that's insightful. As someone who fell out of the system, I mean, it's not that my parents didn't care. It's not that my husband didn't care. It's not that my friends didn't care. It's that, like, as a society, we're not looking at who loses their personhood in this. What do we expect will happen if your son has an accident at a rugby game when he's 19 and is rendered quadriplegic? Now what? Now what happens for decades? Now what happens when someone is born with our son was 72nd diagnosed in the world with his syndrome. And now there's about 2,000 just based on different testing. But like, they give you your diagnosis and they go, here's a bunch of pamphlets about, the mental health line and supports that will be available to you in 2.5 years. Don't lose the pamphlet. And, go home and love him. And you're like, no, like, dude, there's like stuff I got to do right now. And he can't sit up and I don't even know if he can hear me. Like, there's stuff, and not just that, there's stuff we can do, and we're not addressing that because it costs money. It doesn't matter that we're pushing these problems decades down the road. I mean, the fact of politics is that it's only the near term that we deal with. But if we're, as a society, we're pushing so many of these problems down the road, like elder care, housing, like every vulnerable person in society is personally terrified, and we don't have a voice. I mean, we're in the middle of a federal election, national debates happening, and I don't see vulnerable Canadians. I don't see vulnerable Canadians being represented by any of the parties, really. I don't see an insightful, truthful, look right at it, don't turn away discussion of the fact that we've dismantled Canadian society to a point where I've got mine and I don't care if you're vaccinated or not, I don't need to wear a mask. Like that, we're having all these, like, dude, like.
Yeah. Today, there's, I think in Ontario, at least, there's, a number of hospitals that were being picketed by anti-vaxxer folks. And, they're yelling and screaming unmasked to people who are coming out of chemotherapy, and everyone's horrified, but that's just a symptom of how little we've cared about folks who are sick and unwell and all of those kinds of things, right? I mean, I really believed last year with everything that was going on, I was like, we're maybe finally going to have a conversation about elder care and the isolation that disabled folks feel. And here we are at election and we're not having that conversation. And one of the things that you talked in terms of the isolation piece and the systemic failures, right? So you were very gracious in calling out in length all of the great folks in the medical team who showed up for you and your family. You're very clearly like, there are great people doing that work, but the system is busted. And the other element where you're really naming the ableism is in that it takes a village and you need community, but a lot of people are uncomfortable with the notion of disability, particularly intellectual disabilities. And again, you did not flinch. Like I was like, yeah, like this is some spicy takes, and I was here for it. Like you're like, this person was not there for me, and then this happened. But that's what happens. So did you have any? Like you must have had some feelings about being really raw about those people that are actually still in, you know, that are part of your world. Was there any, like, did you stop yourself, or did you say I have to do it this way or I can't at all?
Oh yeah, there are a few people that didn't get named because it like to tell the story is just grotesque. Like they'd have to move. but I mean, really, are any of us actually villains in this world? Like, no matter how bad someone treats you, like, are they actually the villain of their story? They're never the villain of their story. Of course, like people are frail and fragile and flawed, and I've failed people. I'm sure there's people out there who curse my name, like, you know, but you're measured by the enemies you make, whatever. But like, at the same time, like there aren't villains in this. What you say is, you know, what you say about the ableism, like there's just this unvarnished ableism in Canadian society that we don't talk about. Just this bigotry of low expectations and a sense of you must be grateful for anything you get as assistance or help, or because you should be pulling yourself up by the bootstraps of this genetic anomaly somehow, or whatever. Like you got hit by a car in an intersection while you were walking with the light, and now your hip is busted for the rest of your life, and it pains you, and you have to go to the chiropractor, which isn't covered by healthcare. Which, how do you pay? You know, and like the avalanche of consequences from these happenstance things. It's incredible that we take these instances that are individual and we just go, those are your fault. Those are your problem. And then like, it's like, well, you wanted kids. Well, yeah, but you sure seem to want like the Canada Pension Plan, and you don't like kids, and they're going to pay for it. So like,
we're in community. We're in community, whether we want to admit it or not. We are human beings who are living in community.
That's right.
And like you say, you know, in the context of the pandemic, we've all been deprived of our community, but that's a glimpse into the lives of disabled folks every day, in this sort of being shuttered away, not being part of broader community. And then when the hospital is like, you're going to need volunteers, you're going to need people to help. Yeah, that can be a really painful process, which you talked about, right? Which is like, yeah, I feel like I'm asking too much of folks, but also I'm drowning. And that balance of how do I keep us afloat while also not burning every bridge, right?
It was very difficult. And I think that, I don't know if I say this in the book, but I've said it during the interview process. I've said that like, I am surprised that there aren't more tragedies in these situations like ours, like other people who have disabled children who have immediate medical crises that lead to years of poverty and difficulty. Like this country's weather is harsh, and that every single sidewalk isn't accessible is redonkulous. Like we build, you know, gazebos for constituents as thank yous in like rural-ish Ontario, and we don't make public buildings really truly accessible. Like we're not looking at like the education system, bananas. Like we're not stupid. We know Denmark's doing it. We know that Finland's doing it. I mean, we went to Nicaragua and we're touring every single museum in Nicaragua, absolutely accessible, even the ones built out of like quite some time ago. Absolutely accessible, like little rails and stuff, everything. You're like, way to go, Sandinistas. Like I thought, you know, like they were of the people, you know. And yeah, when we say we're living in a society, everybody who's got those truck nuts on their car and driving around, gotta be me out in the woods on their skidoos and stuff, they like the traffic lights that control things, and they like highways, and they call the fire department when Fort McMurray is burning down. And like, those are all public goods. We are together paying for those things. And together we are not looking at the fact that as a society, we haven't decided what Canada wants to be. We haven't decided that Canada isn't US light, or maybe we should be more like the US. We just haven't made any of those decisions, and we're not moving forward we're not going toward anything. We're just like falling around like floaties in a pool.
Yeah. And so I wonder, trying to strike that balance of like telling real talk, right? Like, this is what it's like. And there's beautiful, funny, hilarious moments. And there's like the darkest of the darkest of the dark, and you're lonely and you find community and all those things. And when you're writing a story that's ongoing, right? I wondered, how did you decide on your parameters? Like, in terms of, because it ends on kind of a happy note, and then you're like, here's my epilogue, shit is shit. And you're like, yes. And then you're like, and then COVID happened, and it was this. So yeah, that balance of like, I mean, I didn't read this thinking the whole time there is no hope, right? Like, it was very clearly, but then there's, I guess that expectation, particularly when, as we said earlier, right, like, there's an expectation that stories about folks with disabilities that are not written by folks with disabilities necessarily, that it's this like inspiration porn thing of like, look at my son, look at this miracle, you can have this too. But also giving this unvarnished look. Like, how did you decide on that balance?
This book was made up of, like, I had something like 650 pages written. This is like the super short version of what I had. And like, I went to the Banff Center in Banff, Alberta, when it still had incredible programming, one of which was the Writer's Studio. And I was there for 5 weeks. And before I left, I printed out everything that I had written. I didn't know how long it was. And I was like, oh no, like, just carrying this binder full of craziness. And much of it was repetitive, but I had gathered it in notebooks and on pieces of paper and in my phone for years. And I basically took a chronological to ask, how did I actually write the book and choose the parts? Like, there were parts, of course, that I really wanted in the book. There's a scene where like I come in with Alexandra, and the physiotherapist at the hospital has sort of set us up to show up at the same time as these other women with disabled children who are more profoundly disabled than Alexandra. And it's meant to be like, why are you bothering us with all these questions? These women sit in the hot tub with their kid while it's seizing and don't cause problems. And I'm horrified, and I go back to the car and have a big temper tantrum and drive home silent. And of course, there were bits of that I wanted those to be like those points that you could kind of stick the peg in and pull yourself forward from. And we wanted to, but a lot of it came just out of the initial rage, what came through the consistency of the narrative comes from the repetition of my frustrations with the fact that I'd say to people, like, I feel like I'm drowning. They're like, yeah. So have you seen that? And I'm like, what the fuck was that? Like, I just told you I feel like I'm dying. like, and then getting ghosted by some of my friends. Like, you're like, really? Like, seriously? After all these years, you're gonna ghost me?
Yeah.
Okay, I guess, like.
Yeah, like, was fun. But also like, but very, I mean, they're it's a powerful piece to insert, right? Because I mean, I feel like I will remember that scene in the hot tub for years. Like, it was such a vivid picture of like, oh, this is what we do. It's that constant, like, just be resilient, just be stoic. Someone has it worse. It's almost this like, for a secular society, we go like real deep into some like biblical, like, suffering builds character, just be grateful, all of this kind of nonsense that you're like, yeah, okay, I can be grateful at the end of the day, sure. But for those 23.5 hours out the day when I'm exhausted and like crying for help, that gratitude is not paying my bills also.
Well,
or,
that was
giving me physio or any of those things, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. I was going to say, like, I mean, one of the things that our books have in common is that like, it's really clear that we asked for help and we did the things we were supposed to do. You're supposed to ask for help. You're supposed to call the cops. You're supposed to write everything down. And then when you're like, I wrote it all. I got this here and I got, and they're like, yeah, you're just, you're worrying too much. You need to take, just take it down a notch and give yourself a break. You're like, what the, like, do something. You're the person who has the,
Yeah. It's that thing when people in the system talk about the system like it's its own entity. It's like when people, so for example, like if I'm trying to build a bridge, I'm defined by like the laws of gravity and what that beam can physically withhold, fine. But when you're talking about systems that are made up of people, the people decide what the system does. But there's so often where people in the legal system, the medical education system, where people just kind of throw their hands up and say, well, but I'm just a cog in the old wheel. And it's like, yeah, but if all of the cogs got together and cared about us,
even if 3 of the cogs got together at the same time,
even if you just had a little lunch and learn where you plotted a revolution in the lunchroom, but just like that idea of people just really throwing their hands up, either being blatant with their apathy, which in some cases you experience, or also just that like hallmark, like, well, you could have it worse, Ashley, and that's today's lesson. And you're like, thanks, hot tub lady, you are the worst. but stitched together, I mean, that's the most realistic portrayal. And I can see from folks in the comments, which by the way, we're going to have Q&A. So please pop your questions in the Q&A box. If you're on Zoom, if you're on Facebook, just post it underneath and the lovely OPL folks will pass it over to us over on Zoom. But yeah, one woman saying, thank you for sharing your journey. It's really important as a mother of a son with an ultra rare genetic disease. Your brutally honest, introspective account of your experience validated how I feel and what I've been going through. Thank you. I'm sure that's not the first time you've heard that in this book journey of yours. Yeah, what's the reception been like?
It's been people who know me read the book and tend to get in touch with me about a third of the way through the book. I don't know, something there. I've never figured out what it is, but there's something there that they're like, oh, okay, I'll tell Ashley how much I like the book. And then I never hear from them at the end, or I hear, oh my God, it was so good. I bought 5 copies and I give them the book. But I have to tell you, it's been heartbreaking, galvanizing, but heartbreaking in the extreme, how many women I've heard from across Canada, from like Labrador to the Yukon, who say, this is what they say. This is exactly my experience. I could have written this book. I was telling the absolute truth from my point of view about what happened to me, and to hear, and I anticipated somehow, either narcissistically or hopefully, that it would be an unusual and extreme experience that I went through. It's not. This is unfortunately a snapshot of many, many people's lives, which has been like I don't even know what to do with that. Like people, and I respond to every single one of those moms, because why wouldn't you? I mean,
how could you not? Yeah.
But at the same time, you're also like, this is horrifying. I'm like, I'm in regular conversation with moms who have like 36-year-old son in Toronto, who her experience was 30 years ago, and she's still unpacking it, still dealing with it. Of course you are. And all of us with disabled children, like, we all say to ourselves, what's going to happen to these pieces of us after we leave this earth? Like, we're all gonna die. We're all headed for the boxes in the ground. Like, what will happen to our children? I have a cousin who works in corrections in British Columbia. And a couple of years ago, she said to me that a lot of her client base was special needs in some way. And I said, oh, like what percentage? She's like, oh, probably 70%. 70% of the prison population in the Lower Fraser is special needs. Like, we've moved from a residential model to an incarceration model. I don't want Alexander to be incarcerated. Like, I don't want any of those people to be incarcerated. Like, we need to do better, Canada. Come on. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the fact that you so clearly, yeah, I mean, there's just so clearly a pipeline of having, institutionalizing folks with disabilities, which we realize that's not great. But then we didn't give an alternative and we just sent you out into the world. And
community living, which is basically go back to your parents until they die, and then your siblings will manage it somehow until you're poverty stricken. And then something like in Alberta is called AISH. It's an assisted income for severely handicapped people. Is that accurate in Alberta? There's a replica, there's some kind of similar system in each province. And that's like not even CERB level. Like CERB was like, it's a great example. We decided as a country, we're going to keep the economy afloat by giving every working person who could have worked during this pandemic, we're going to lock down for society and we're going to pay everybody $2,000 a month. That was decided to be what everybody needed to live on. And people on these assured incomes get $1,200 a month, $1,400 a month, $1,600 a month, like as a baseline. And they're constantly criminalized and criticized for wasting it or sucking the system dry, or penalized for getting jobs that can supplement that income if they have the capacity and opportunity to do so. Like, we're not talking about how ableist and bigoted this wonderful country is. We have a lovely country here. Like, what are we doing with it? That's a really big question. And in the middle of a federal election, we could be really talking about what do we want rather than scoring points or
just dunking on each other constantly. Yeah, I mean, my background's actually in gerontology, and Canada leads the world in deaths by elderly women of COVID. And you would know it because we don't talk, like, we're literally independent. It's the most bizarro election situation where there's an elephant in the room, which is a pandemic has blown open every social ill in this country. And we're just not going to talk about it. And instead we're going to talk about guns and abortion. It's idiotic. But I think a great sort of point for us to launch over into, if folks have any questions, is that catch-22, the real kicker that you mentioned of, on the one hand, hearing from other mothers who are like, girl, this could be my story. And on the one hand, the absolute devastation of knowing that, because you're like, I wish we weren't the only people. Like, I wish we were kind of the only people that had to go through this, because I would not wish this on anyone. But then on the other hand, does it feel like community to you? Like, do you feel also supported by those folks, or is it just your instant reaction is, man, why, like, this just keeps happening? Because that's something that I've always struggled with. Similarly, like, people read my book and say, oh my God, I also had a stalker and it was horrific and I could have written that story. I mean, same. And on the one hand, you're like, yes, there's this kinship there of like, you see me and I see you, but also I'm like, girl, I wish you didn't have to, like, I wish it was just me. I wish I could say, this is the wildest thing that will never happen to you. And you can't do that. You cannot do that because you know, part of being alive is some of us are disabled. That's how the world works. So that balance, again, that balance of like, I see you, but also like, why are our stories so similar? Because it's clearly not about Ashley if there's like 500 Ashleys across Canada.
I would say that we are living in this vacuum of leadership, and there's that vacuum that I mentioned within medicine right now, like that dismantling of medical sort of authority and like that, well, what do you think is next? And like, does that make, I'm going to tell you something that doesn't make any sense at all. Does that make sense? And you're like, oh my God, don't ask me that question. None of this makes sense. And like, and we have this lack of leadership. We aren't seeing it at the federal and provincial levels. We're not seeing people go, okay, here's what we're going to do, folks. We're going to do this, and then it's going to lead to this. So if you have a next door neighbor, like, I mean, at civic levels, we see this. You see, be a snow guardian or a snow angel, shovel your elderly neighbor's walk. Or at a civic level, we're going to enact mask mandates because our provincial government is too much of a garbage fire to do that for us, and etc. Right? But and those civic level aspects are, or moves and initiatives are fantastic. And don't get me wrong, I think civic government should have way more power in this country. If they're going to provide the leadership, they should have the power. But there's a vacuum there that can be filled, first of all, by women. It really should be filled by women. We've seen lots of guys get kicks at the can, and I don't know how well, guys, like, if we're not really basing anything on evidence anymore, are we? Like, anyway, but I think that there's a role for government. That's the role of government, is to provide leadership and unity in times of crisis and in areas that can't be attended to by the business class. Nobody's going to run like the lights for you. Like, I mean, put up the electrical grid from scratch. Nobody's going to run the school system for everyone for you. Yes, they'll run a religious school. Yes, they'll run a private school or a horseback riding school or whatever. But you know what I mean? Like, the government has a role. Like, there's pillars to society, and one of them's government, and this, and yeah. Anyway, we're just not looking at what's government for. Everybody failed civics at this point.
Yes, collectively, we all get a fail. Absolutely. So I have one of the questions here that says, mentioning that exact piece around the election and government. So are any of the parties advocating for policies and approaches that would make life easier for families like yours? I'm going to assume no, but in terms of platform, I didn't see anything that jumped out at me. But on that, if there's one policy, obvious aside from the funding, like make it rain in a big bad way, yeah, for folks, disabled folks and disabled folks' families and their support networks, is there a particular policy or something that folks can really advocate for?
I mean, I'm not an advocate of any one party in this country. I think everybody's got some like sober second thought stuff. We won't vote conservative. Don't worry, Michelle.
Yeah. ABC,
but,
ABC.
But I would say that when pharmacare is on the table, I think that's something that we should be paying attention to. And I think if every provincial government is going to attack how the medical system is funded and dispersed, we should be having a national conversation on teeth were recently found to be small organs. They're not just little bones in your mouth. They're actually like scientifically peer-reviewed, all the things, little organs. And that's why you can get so sick in other parts of your body when you have problems with your teeth. I mean, there's a local woman here in Calgary who has had years of disability and crazy bills because she wasn't able to deal with a tooth at a time when it became a problem. And now she's profoundly disabled and like what? But I would say pharmacare is important, but I don't see anybody dealing with housing as I have a master's in planning. I'm a housing planner by training. We have a profound housing crisis in Canada. I'm not talking about the real estate prices in Toronto and Vancouver. I'm talking about like access to housing. In a country this cold, there should be nobody homeless. Like, look at just that on parade. Our entire lives, we've walked past people who are homeless in the winter in Canada. Like, check your privilege if you have a roof over your head. We don't have, and peer-reviewed, studied, well-documented, it's way cheaper to house people than it is to deal with the aftermath of their health crises, the social ills, the difficulties of it all. Just house people and not in prison. Like, just house people, for crying out loud. So I'm not seeing that. To answer the question, I'm not seeing a federal party address, just like take a civics class and look at the basic stuff, like infrastructure, address infrastructure. I'm not seeing it.
No, yeah, me neither. So someone's saying there's no roadmap for parents with kids with special needs, as you said, unlike parents with neurotypical kids who have all the resources and roadmaps clearly laid out. So for example, I struggled to find a gymnastics class and after school program that's suitable for my child. So thoughts and feelings on that. Do you have any tips on how to find out resources, but also just generally, this is again something that you talk about in the book, right? It's not just like keeping my son alive. I want him to have a beautiful life, a full life. I have to say, as someone who learned English from going to La Bibliothèque in my small town, who the part that broke, like that made me like, ooh, was your because I was like, that would be me. Actually, I was like, was your he has to read. He has to have an inner life. He has to have an inner life. And I was like, ooh, I felt that in my bones. So that idea of like, not just keep my kid alive, but let him have activities. So in this case, right, like gymnastics and meeting other folks, like, yeah, what advice would you have for, and if there's no advice, just burn it all down. That's also fine too.
Yeah, let's burn it down. I'll bring the pitchfork. Like, one of the difficulties, I'll address this in a little bit of a roundabout way. There are lots of programs that can accommodate your child, but they're more expensive. Or there's some kind of, well, you have to pay the regular rate, even though your kid is going to learn at like a quarter of the speed, or needs an aid there. The aid has to pay too, or, you know, or whatever, like swimming lessons. Like, it took me 3 years to teach my kid to swim. We went 4 times a week and I taught that little bugger to swim. But like, nobody else was going to be able to do it for me. There was a special needs swim class that cost $75 for like 4 months. It was like cheap as chips, and it was wonderful, and everybody meant really well. He learned absolutely nothing because it was people with a program and they wanted to do a good thing. Like, how do you, as the owner of a gymnastics facility, offer a program for a special needs parent at a reduced rate? Like, it's all rather difficult, and comes back to the fact that if we had leadership in government and funding, and also like a bigger conversation about inclusion, not, yes, you can come if you can figure it out. Yes, you can come if an aide is with you, but truly inclusion. Oh, you don't function that way? Okay, no problem. Like, kind of a problem, but let's figure it out. Like, we're not willing to have the messy middle last for very long. We're willing to have the initial conversation, which is like, oh, your kid hits other people, eh? I don't know, I'll get back to you. And then they, you know, like, there's no like, how do we support around you? How can we, like, there's no, you're not assigned an advocate who can help you learn how to do it properly. Like, you know, like I say in the book, I have tons of advantages. I'm the most privileged parent of a special needs kid that I know. And just, I'm Canadian, English speaking. I live in the city I grew up in. My dad is a doctor and a senior physician in this city. I've been really sick myself. I know how to advocate for myself. I have a stable marriage and I only have one other kid. And I own my home. And I'm still like, I still barely made it. I still barely made it. And so I guess the thing that, get involved with groups of other special needs parents and hold on to the people who treat your, okay, this is my actual advice, ready? Hold on to the people who treat you and your kid like they're worth what you and they are worthwhile, and get rid of everybody else as fast as possible.
Cut them loose.
Like, just,
yeah.
because they're a drain on you. You can't make them feel better about your difficult situation. You can't make them care. They're just not going to, or they're going to, and that'll be a surprise and a heartbreak. And so just get rid of everybody who can't be on board, because it's too hard. You can't drag the piano with you.
Yeah, and you shouldn't have to. And I guess that was sort of my big question for you was, you know, what can folks do who don't have disabled family members, who are not having to deal with the daily bureaucracy and the exhaustion of just trying to get services. And like, what can allies do to really show up for folks with disabilities in our communities and their advocates and their family members? Like, what can folks do? What would you say to folks?
Having real conversations, like, fuck, this must suck. Like, wow, like, what would help you right now? Or, I'm making a meal, I'm leaving it at your house. Not, let me know if I can do something. Let me know if I can do something is if your Uncle Jerry died, he's dead, his funeral is paid for. Everybody just needs to like come and shuffle past the coffin. That's, let me know if I can do anything. If there is a child with a disability, or really anybody with specific and special needs I'm talking about, like, my grandmother was delusional at the end of her life. It was very weird because she was intelligent and she could talk to you, but she really believed someone was digging under the house. And you'd go in there and you didn't want to talk to her about the guy digging under the house because there was nobody digging under the house. And she'd be like, Ashley, nobody will talk to me about the person digging under the house. Why won't anybody they all talk about the weather or what I want to have for dinner, but there's someone digging out. And I'm like, and so you have to talk to the caregivers and say, this is messed up and difficult, and I'm going to relieve the burden in XYZ ways. Like I've said before, like, a massage gift certificate is never unwelcome, right? And a meal, even if it goes in the freezer. Here in Calgary, we have something called Simple Simon Pies, and I'm sure there's something like this in your community, wherever you are across Canada. Some frozen pie company that comes in the little pies like this big. They go in the freezer and you pull them out on the night that you just can't anymore. Like, that's always welcome. Babysitting or activities for any other children in the family. Like, our older child, suddenly a lot of their other opportunities vanished because it was, is this going to be complicated to arrange, or will your kid need too much because it's an older sibling of a special needs kid or whatever? The people who just came in were like, we're taking Sloan, we're doing this, we'll see you tomorrow, like, that was way better. I don't know, like, I mean, in the book I talk about my neighbor Dee, who comes across the street and just says, hey, like, your older kid, like, they're gonna be fine. I'm the older kid of a disabled kid and my parents really worried. And so yeah, just being real. Like, there's so much in Finding Dory, there's the octopus who's talking about how small talk is like totally evil, and he's like, how are you? Oh, I'm good, how are you? And then it gets echoed as they go past the doorway at the aquarium. That's basically when you're drowning inside an emergency, and these are emergencies for us. It's like 4 Klaxons DEFCON 8 emergency that's just going to last forever. Coming over and saying, hey, I got you this shawl, but I can't stay. Like, just like,
I don't want your goddamn flowers. Yeah. So like, really trying to think as practical assistance and real talk sounds like the thing that folks are needing, that would be the most valuable, is practical assistance and space for real talk. And someone in the Q&A said, that messy middle is sacred space. That's where transcendence lies. And that space of, yeah, like, I love you and I love your kid, but like, your life sounds awful. Let's, what can I do on a practical level? And a great little, yeah.
So I wanted to jump in and just say that the parent advocates for children with autism in Ontario have been doing an amazing job over the last couple of years, just like making their voices known and coming into the legislature and marching and coming together as a community. And like, these are people with children with autism are often incredibly isolated, because we looked at autism as something that we were going to just put over there. It was unpredictable. It was Rain Man. It was Temple Grandin, but not as good kind of as Temple Grandin. Like, there's all these like yikes. And we put it over there and everybody was just supposed to like, oh yeah, you know, like Cheryl has a son with a disability, so we don't see her much anymore. She's kind of touchy now. And it's like, dude, like, I had one friend's sister tell me that her son, I'd come to an event in Calgary with my son. My son was at the front with me, and afterwards she came up to me and she said, it was amazing to see you with your son right up at the front. And I was like, oh, thanks. And she said, yeah, my son's 26. Nobody liked it when I brought him out. And it was like, oh my God, like you've spent 26 years in your house because other people didn't like it.
Because other people were uncomfortable.
Because other people were uncomfortable.
Yeah, let's not do that. Folks, community, friends, let's not do that.
Do that.
Let's not do that. But let's all buy and read your beautiful, powerful, ragey, funny, sassy. Love it. Love it. Beautiful. My Own Blood. It was so powerful. So thank you, thank you, thank you so much for having this chat with us. Thank you to everyone who has been here and also been chiming in with really powerful, you know, testimony from their own experiences. So someone just said, you know, I come from a family where my disabled sister was viewed by my extended family as a punishment from God, which meant my single mom was forced to bear a heavy burden. Community support is so important. I'm so sorry that happened to you. That's absolute bullshit. And we got to just keep showing up for folks. And if you're not seeing older people in your public spaces and you're not seeing people with visible disabilities in public spaces, ask yourself why. Because they're out there, they're just not welcome in those spaces, and we have to do something about that. So thank you so much, Ashley, for writing this book, for being brave as hell. Pick up My Own Blood. It's so good. It's so good. I loved it, loved it, loved it. Get it from an indie bookstore, preferably, or pick it up from OPL. I'm going to do the plug that there are more events coming up. So don't forget, Wednesday, September 15th at 7 p.m. It's a French conversation en français avec Marité Morin as part of Quoi c'est des mots, a series that highlights Ontarian authors writing en français. Yes to fellow Franco-Ontarians. Thank you so much, folks, for being here. Thank you to Sean and Jill for all the tech work. Thank you, Ashley, for being here all the way from Calgary. Bon courage, as my people say. Yeah, pick up this wonderful book, folks. Thanks for being here and taking the time.
I'll see you too.